At the start of the anime, we meet Hotaru, a laid-back guy who's just starting at a new high school. He sees the world as a pretty boring place, and in his opinion, if something isn't important, he absolutely won't bother doing it. But if something is truly necessary, he'll put in 100% of his effort to get it done as quickly as possible. We also find out that he lives in Japan with his family, but he's pretty lonely, frustrated, and just done with everything. On his first day at school, he decides he's going to get through these high school years quietly, by himself, avoiding unnecessary drama and conserving as much energy as possible. As he walks into school, he sees the students welcoming new arrivals and trying to get them to join various clubs. He ignores them completely, puts his shoes in his locker, and heads to his classroom. There, he runs into Satoshi, his only friend, and someone he's known for a long time. Satoshi knows all about Hotaru's life philosophy: minimum effort, maximum relaxation. They sit down and chat about the first day of school, and Satoshi brings up the topic of clubs, hoping that maybe, just maybe, Hotaru has had a change of heart. But nope, Hotaru couldn't care less. Then, Satoshi asks, "If you're all about avoiding effort, why are you still here? You usually leave the moment classes are over." Without a word, Hotaru hands him a letter. When Satoshi opens it, he realizes it's from Hotaru's sister, who's currently in India. She asks him to join the Classic Literature Club, saying that every year, fewer and fewer students sign up, and she's worried the club will get shut down. She mentions that she has a personal connection to this club, which is why she really wants him to join before it disappears completely. Since Hotaru really loves his sister, he agrees to her request. So, she reassures him that he won't have to deal with anyone because, well, there are no other members in the club anyway. She knows he's an introvert, so if he joins, he'll have the entire club room to himself. And honestly, when Hotaru hears this, he's thrilled. No energy wasted, no socializing, just pure, peaceful solitude. He says goodbye to Satoshi and heads to the staff room to get the classroom key. On his way there, he gets even happier when he realizes that the club room is in the farthest corner of the school, completely out of the way. Perfect. He grabs the key, unlocks the door, and steps inside. But, surprise, there's a girl inside. She's standing by the window, looking all mysterious, with her hair swaying in the sunlight. She turns around and introduces herself as Eru Chitanda. Then, with a bright smile, she tells him that she's actually known him since they were in kindergarten. Hotaru is stunned. Kindergarten. He doesn't remember anyone from back then. There weren't even that many kids in their class. How is it possible that she remembers him? Eru casually explains that she joined the club for personal reasons, then asks if he's a member too. Hotaru, being Hotaru, immediately denies it. Nope, haven't joined yet, and now that I see there are people here, definitely not joining. Without another word, he turns to leave and tells her to close the door behind him. But then, she says, I can't close the door. Confused, he asks why. She explains that she doesn't have the key. Hotaru raises an eyebrow, pulls the key out of his pocket, and hands it to her. Then it hits him. If she didn't have the key, how did she even get inside? She looks just as confused and says, "Wait, the door was locked?" And that's when it clicks. She didn't even realize she was locked inside. Now she's puzzled, trying to figure out how the door locked itself when she never had the key in the first place. At that moment, Satoshi walks in, checking on Hotaru. When he hears what happened, he's just as surprised. As Hotaru turns to leave, Eru grabs his hand, and with big, pleading eyes says, "Please let's solve this mystery." For the first time, something inside Hotaru stirs. A strange feeling. A feeling he's never had before. And so, despite himself, he agrees. He asked her if she has noticed anything weird. She then recalls hearing a strange noise before she got locked in. They all focus, and soon enough, they hear weird sounds too. They go outside and run into the school janitor, who's locking up all the empty rooms. Turns out, he assumed the club room was empty because it's tucked away in a quiet part of the school. So, without realizing Eru was inside, he locked the door and moved on. Mystery solved. Later, as they head to their lockers, Eru asks Satoshi if he wants to join their club too. Even though he's already part of several clubs, he agrees. Hotaru tries to tell him that he's not really planning on staying in the club, but Eru grabs his hand and insists, "You are staying." And just like that, Hotaru caves, fills out the application form, and boom, they're now the official members of the Classic Literature Club. The next day, after school, Hotaru is stuck writing an essay for homework. Satoshi teases him, saying, "Wait, you didn't do your homework?" Hotaru rolls his eyes and replies, "I did do it. I just left it at home." Satoshi laughs, then brings up a new mystery floating around school. A girl had walked past the music room that morning when it was raining. She heard someone playing the piano inside, but when she opened the door, bam! The room was completely empty. The music stopped, but she felt a presence creeping toward her. Then, out of nowhere, something emerged from the darkness, a figure with wild hair and glowing red eyes. Terrified, she ran for her life, slamming the door shut behind her. Satoshi finishes telling the story, clearly excited. He turns to Hotaru, expecting him to be just as intrigued. But nope. Hotaru is still writing his essay, completely unfazed. Then, suddenly, he asks, "Has this story spread around the school?" Satoshi grins. "Oh yeah, everyone knows about it." Hotaru sighs. He knows what's coming next. Eru will definitely want to investigate this. He immediately takes out a piece of paper and starts scribbling something before telling Satoshi to tell her a make-believe story about the mystery of the secret clubhouse. Eru arrives perfectly on cue, enters the room, and walks straight over to their desk, asking whether they have heard about the music room mystery. Fotaro, however, quickly cuts her off and tells her that Satoshi was telling him about a very famous mystery at this school. She immediately gets hooked, and Satoshi makes up a story about a secret club known as the Spider Club. This is a ghost club in which no one knows who the member is or how they are selected. It is said that they always put their notice on the notice board, but only a select few people are able to find it every year. This immediately intrigued her, and she asked whether they would help her find it. Fotaro finishes his essay at that very moment and tells her that yes, he will. They all go to the notice board on their floor and rummage through it, but are unable to find anything of substance. Finally, Hotaru advises that maybe they should go down to the main notice board, which all of them agree is a good idea. They make their way to the ground floor and are awed to see the notice board filled with so many posters from all of the numerous clubs around the school. The notice board looks like a war zone, as all the clubs want to portray their clubs on the main board so that they catch more eyes. They start looking closely at the board and see through almost every poster, but start losing hope when suddenly, Hotaru draws their attention and informs them that he found it below one of the posters. He shows her the small notice for the Spider Club, but she doesn't seem to be very impressed by this. She tells him that she gets the feeling that this mystery wasn't a mystery to begin with, as there are many loopholes in it. They, however, realize that it is getting late and decide to part ways. Satoshi and Hotaru start walking back together when Satoshi asks him why he crafted the lie and created the poster for the Spider Club, and then he puts it below the other notice while no one is looking. He looks at him and tells him that he simply didn't want to go to the music room, as it was on the farther side of the hall and not on his way to move outside the school. Satoshi looks at him in awe and starts laughing before asking whether he has any idea about the mystery of the music room. Hotaru looks at him and says that the music room is almost always occupied by really passionate students who have given their entire lives to music. The pianist especially has a habit of sleeping inside the room, as she doesn't want to waste time, so she closed the windows in the rooms and slept while playing a CD of classical music on the tape recorder, which acted as an alarm, as when the music gets over, she will realize it and wake up. That is why when the student opened the room, she saw no one at the piano, but heard the music playing, and as soon as the music stopped, she woke up groggy with bloodshot eyes because of the low amount of rest, which scared the living daylights out of the poor student, and she ran away. Satoshi looks at him in awe and tells him that his energy-conserving ways will be put to the test because of Eru, as she seems to be the only one who can force him to work. They then split up to go back to their homes to get some well-deserved rest. A month has passed since the last incident, and Hotaru seems to have gotten used to this new routine. Most of the time, he doesn't mind it at all, because he only has to go there after classes for a bit and sit and read a book, which he doesn't really mind anyway. He likes it best when Eru doesn't talk to him and simply reads her book, but she has developed a cute habit. where she offers her some of her homemade sweets every time he sits down to read. One fine day, while reading the book in the after hours and enjoying his tea, Iru suddenly stands up, saying that this is not how a club is supposed to be. Hotaro looks at her and tells her to sit down and not waste energy on useless things. She, however, complains about how their club is monotonous, and they never do anything for fun. Hotaro looks at her and tells her that their club is supposed to be a literature club, and not some sports club, where they need to perform activities. She, however, is adamant and tells him that they should start preparing for the upcoming school festival. Hotaro tells her that he has no interest in doing anything for the school festival whatsoever. Iru tells him that she won't hear anything about not doing anything for the school festival. He looks at her exhausted and tells her that they will also open some dumb stalls like any other club, but she refuses him. She tells him that the literature club has had a very rich history, and every single year people from the club have created an anthology for the festival, and they should do the same. Hotaro outright refuses to have anything to do with that and tells her that he doesn't want to spend so much energy on anything and would rather do something low effort. She keeps pestering him to the point of asking whether Hotaro thinks that creating an anthology would be less work than dealing with her every day pestering him about creating an anthology, so he agrees to her demand. He asks her whether she has any idea about how this thing has to be created, to which she replies that she doesn't. He asks her how she will do this if she has no idea how the anthology has to be written, but she replies that they will just find the previous year's copies and then learn how to write it. Hotaro is again frustrated because of the work she is making him do, but he can't say anything because of how dedicated she seems, so they both start searching through the entire room for the copies of the previous year's anthologies. They are unable to find the anthologies in the room, so Hotaro sits down on his desk, but she tells him that they are not done yet and drags him out to the library, as she believes the library will have the copies for sure. In the library, they see a short-haired girl sitting behind the counter named Ebara, who seems to know Hotaro and makes a face when he comes inside. She tells him that if he is up to no good, he isn't welcome here, but he retorts with a wisecrack of his own, pissing her off. At the very moment, however, Satoshi appears inside the library and Imura's temperament immediately changes. Iru seems confused at this sudden change, but Hotaro says that Ebara used to like Satoshi during her middle school days when they studied together. Satoshi is a guy with maxed out rizz and can make anyone's water break just by speaking to them in his charming voice. He asks Hotaro what he's up to, and he replies that this is more of a hostage situation as this absolute numbskull Iru has forcefully retracted him from his seat, where he had happily glued his ass so that he doesn't have to move. Satoshi laughs at this and goes on to introduce both Iru and Ebara to each other, and Iru gets straight to the point, asking her whether she has seen the previous year's anthology from the literature club. Ebara looks at Hotaro and smirks, asking how the hell did a loser like him actually join a club but like a true Sigma. He tells her to shut her trap. She turns towards Iru and replies that she doesn't have any idea about the anthologies as she hasn't seen them around in the library, but believes that they might be kept in the stack. Iru asks her whether they can see the stack, but she tells her that only the librarian can let them have a look at that. Hotaro has had enough of these thoughts talking to each other, and like an absolute Chad, he simply starts walking outside the door. He is, however, stopped by Iru, who has vowed to herself that she will make this poor man's life hell. She tells him that they are going to wait for the librarian, and while they were arguing about that, Satoshi chimed in between, asking Ebara to recount the mystery that she was talking about earlier. Hotaro thinks to himself that he is never going to see the end of it if Ebara tells a mystery, which makes Iru curious, but Ebara starts the story. She tells them that for some time now, she's been noticing a mysterious pattern in a book. She explains that she stays over in the library every Friday, and for some reason, every Friday a book is borrowed from the library during the lunch break and is then returned by the end of the day. This is very confusing because when you borrow a book, you can keep it for a week before returning it to the library, but for some reason, the person who borrows it always returns it the very same day. Iru asks her excitedly whether she can have a look at the book, and Ebara takes out the book for her, which is a really beautiful hardcover leather-bound book about the history of the school. Iru comments that the book looks pretty, and everyone agrees. Hotaro, meanwhile, is trying to ignore all of this and decides to keep reading his book as he just wants to get the anthologies and go back home. Iru, however, is not going to let the lad have his leisure time and keeps putting the book in front of his eyes, while Hotaro looks at her like he wants to slap her. He looks at it and says that maybe it isn't such a big deal, and that some students won't have a look at it during his free time. Ebara, however, tells him to have a look at the people who are borrowing the book. It turns out that every single time there is a different person borrowing the book. This is perplexing because why would different people borrow the same book every single week and follow the same pattern of borrowing it during their lunch break and returning it by the end of the day? This is indeed very intriguing, and even Hotaro seems very confused. He, however, doesn't want to spend any energy on such things and tries to weasel his way out of it, but Iru continuously pesters him by putting the book in front of him. Ibara finally tells them to settle down and not make much noise in the library, and they shut up immediately.